Know your consumer deeply, win with shoppers, create engaging brand experiences. And I think it's really important if you want to move fast in an organization to embrace some of the core fundamentals. You know, for example, the one that I look at every single day is that every consumer contact is an attractive and rewarding experience. That's at the heart of what makes apps sticky and effective. That's what makes consumer services such a strategic asset to the company today. And I think that if we can kind of reach into those fundamentals, they'll kind of empower us to move forward. I think also, all of us that are transforming our company, we're all in the business of persuasion. It's all a game of internal persuasion. How do you convince the skeptics? How do you move the organization? How do you move budget? Part of the way you have to do that is you have to understand where there are comfort zones. Like at Nestle, a comfort zone might be certain pillars of marketing, and reminding managers that they actually already agree with the digital agenda, they just don't know it. And you have to really kind of make that critical translation. And I think that's helped us a lot. And as we look at some of these new areas that we're getting into, like personalization, again, it's kind of the blend of kind of reach back, but reach forward. And that's, I think it's critical.
So, this guy's corporate headquarters, I've always said, is the most beautiful in the world in Vevey, Switzerland. Culture steeped in tradition, but maybe there's some resistance to change. How do you infuse the culture? How do you guys have done a whole bunch of things. I've been to that, and
okay.
You guys have this reverse mentoring. I mean, talk about how you infuse this.
Well, first, let me put some numbers on the table. So we're 150 years old this year. Big deal for us. About 340,000 employees, biggest company I've ever worked for. They say over 2,000 brands. I haven't counted all of them. And even on our internal social network, I think we have over 100,000 active users, which is pretty amazing. So yeah, the question is how do you drive transformation in an entity that large? I mentioned one tactic, which is don't ignore your fundamentals. They may actually be your go-go juice for the future. I think test and learn is really important. I think one of the first things I did, I'm a big believer in the principle of constructive paranoia, which is, external focus will motivate management in very important ways. I mean, whether you bring them to an event like this, I've done a lot of tours of the Silicon Valley, I've spent time in Berlin, all the different startup hubs, but it's very motivating, it's very humbling. I mean, when I go to the Silicon Valley, I get very intimidated, I get very insecure, I get motivated to realize that we need to move much faster. There are players that can potentially beat us. And I did a lot of that early on, and it motivates action. And one of the things that we did was after kind of our first Silicon Valley tour, we decided to create a program focused on digital acceleration. And I guess we asked ourselves a question, like, what if we created a small hub right above our executive suite in our global headquarters, where we would empower employees that are very close to the digital technologies to hack, to work on strategic projects, to reverse mentor top executives, to make our internal social network work, because to get any internal technology to work, you have to have, a cadre of believers. And we were pretty blown away. It actually worked. And part of it is the power of diversity. One thing I love about Nestle, it's radically decentralized. I think we got business operations in just about every country. And so we'll bring in, this program has brought in about 50 markets have participated in the program. And it's pretty humbling. I mean, I probably did bring some American, we're doing it well in key areas, but you quickly learn that, oh my gosh, China is doing mobile really well. You learn that in Malaysia and Philippines, they really get word of mouth. India is doing brilliant work in content production. Spain is doing brilliant work in online listening. And that tapestry of learning is what really creates the magic in an organization. And part of our role as digital leaders is to be really smart curators. How do we take the best practices from a market and try to scale? And I often say share and scale. And so you kind of we created that little incubator. And you know, it's been a good experience. We did this, we would bring in our leaders for 8 months at a time. They would then go back to their markets and lead initiatives, whether leading digital or e-commerce, or even just running a business like Nescafe, but they're digitally fortified. And we've now done, I think we're in the 8th cycle. In fact, our leader of the 8th program is here somewhere, Ana Caldera, from the Portuguese market. And that's had a big impact. But all of these things are just beachheads into other action. Because what we did is that gave us a certain degree of confidence to push other initiatives, like establishing a Silicon Valley Innovation Outpost, which now has 15 people, and they are really in touch with the startup pulse. And then we recently launched an open innovation platform where, which is kind of our way of saying that, listen, we're not going to figure it out all internally.
Yeah.
We need your help. That's why we're here. I think I want to go tell all those startups that, hey, we've got an online platform where we need help. But the idea is that we'll kind of put out business challenges, and the businesses can kind of pitch for it. And we just launched it a couple of months ago. We launched, it's called Henry, after Nestle's founder, Henry Nestle. And those are some examples of how we're really trying to drive a change agenda.
So let's move to the...
Am I scaring you yet?
What's that?
Am I scaring you yet?
No, it's exciting. Let's move to the fast money round here.
Okay.
All right. Keeping on the pace of technology, there's a ton of startups here from all over the world.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. I'm excited at Oracle to be leading this whole, startup culture, reinvention, innovation globally, and I've just seen incredible excitement. The cost of doing business is so much lower, but one of the key stats I remember when I was building Venture 2011, Scott Brinker had the marketing technology landscape. There was 100 companies on there. Now there's 4,000. Any advice for these startups? Like, they see Nestle and dang, big old pot of money, and how do they get access to that? And how do you think about pulling all these technologies together?
There used to be a rule that, your partner had to be a certain size and have a certain maturity level for us to take it seriously. That was always the, go with IBM kind of the argument. I think we're increasingly recognizing that there is no perfect size to start with the startup. I mean, sometimes, there may be a couple players that are just onto a really big idea, and I think we're trying to figure out how do we, work with them as early as possible. Because a lot of them are creating value in ways that will be highly relevant to our brands, whether it's pure technology, whether it's the service layer, it could be a marketing automation solution. But what's amazing, and I did spend some time looking at some of the players, and one of them was like the alpha area, and I was amazed at how many of the players were kind of going right in the zone that I've been thinking about, and I think we need to keep a very, very open mind to the smaller players. Now that's easier said than done, and I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, hey, dude, I tried to do business with Nestle, and it was, it's a long, painful process, and there's some truth to that. And what we're trying to figure out is how do we ensure that we're compliant, but that we're also really fast. And I think we're starting to make some progress there, but it's absolutely positively in our interest to figure out ways of working with the long tail of players, not just the the bigger pool.
Yeah. So along those lines, again, back to the startups, and applies to big companies. Every one of my startups had a vision. Ended up, every one of them pivoted. It used to be a bad word when you and I first got in technology, and now it's like a strength. Facebook pivots to mobile, and they're one of the most valuable companies in the world. Can you talk a little bit about the pivot, and how does Nestle think about that?
Well, I just think you need to be very, very adaptive. I mean, I had to pivot. I mean, I almost lost all my money in 2001 and had to become an enterprise software company. But we survived and we ultimately thrived. But yeah, I think even in, I talked about the DAP program. You have to have the flexibility to adapt it. We weren't focusing on e-commerce in phase 1. Then we hired a great guy from Amazon who came on board, and we decided, let's give equal emphasis to e-commerce and e-business. Now we're thinking more about data and personalization. So, I think the same pivot mentality of a startup can also apply to a large organization that's trying to drive a change element. It's all about, staying relevant, and your internal stakeholders are like external customers, and you have to really ensure that you're delivering the value that they need against the context that's changing.
So I got 3 more questions.
Okay.
The clock is, we're fine.
Okay.
Number 1 is, we're in this topsy-turvy world. I advise startups that I'm on the board of, they've got to think outside the box. If you think about like the M&A, for example, like don't just think of the usual suspects. Every big company in the world is trying to do accelerators. You got your, I guess, competitor Unilever's buying Dollar Shave Club. Can you just talk a little bit about there's a crazy stuff happening right now.
Well, listen, digital is enabling really exciting new business models, and a lot of you are creating them, and they're digital by design. They're skipping TV, they're using digital listening, they're using digital operating principles, and they're definitely using digital delivery, which there's a huge proliferation of players that will deliver products directly, to consumers. And so, do the big companies need to pay attention to that? Yeah, I see it as all upside. I think we are in an incredibly exciting time to be in business and marketing. And even if you're in a large company, you can be a change agent. And I think there's an appetite at the top in the large enterprises to move really, really fast. I always remind people, never be afraid to write the memo. There may have been a memo of change that you got completely rejected 2 years ago. Put it back into the system. The context has really changed, precisely because of some of those examples that you brought out. I think there's a different order of urgency, and we're very excited about participating in that exploratory.
That's great advice. So what other advice would you give to a marketer that's sitting in an organization that, sees they need to lead or take a drive towards innovation? How do they go?
Yeah, listen, technology's amazing. It's going to continue to get smarter, sharper, shinier, but the consumer fundamentals are critical. I think mobile is a rude awakening that we have to be insanely consumer-centric. I was on the innovation jury for Cannes year before last. We looked at 200 applications, and there was great technology behind all of them, but the winners always had a simple, consumer-centric, mobile-first premise behind it, and that's an old-fashioned fundamental that we cannot forget. Simplicity rules in a world of mobile. Don't lose sight of that. I have to write that on my forehead every single day because sometimes I forget. But I do think that's what's going to guide us to incredible value creation in this industry.
Any big predictions on, not the election, but next big technology? What are you excited about?
I'm pretty bullish about all of it. I clearly, everywhere commerce is pretty exciting. I do think, the removal of friction in all the processes of driving transaction is very exciting. I think we're in the very early, I used to say innings, I was born at Nestle. Don't use American metaphors. So we're in the early soccer game of mobile innovation, and that is incredibly exciting. I'm excited about Internet of Things. But again, my caution is, let's not get too enamored with the shiny new object aspect of the technology. Like, what are the fundamental consumer benefits that improve lives, delight consumers, and ultimately build brands? We're brand builders at the core.
Anything else you want to cover? You want to ask me or talk about? Or
thanks for all the partnership that you've provided, and I certainly hope that we have a chance to do this again sometime.
Awesome. I think we don't have time for questions, and we don't have a vehicle, but we're going to be around. I'm here the week, and Pete's here till tonight, and we hope you guys have a fantastic conference, and thanks so much for being here. Thank you. Thank you, Ken.
All right, I'd like to thank Pete and Reggie. All right, as everybody gets settled, talk a little bit about our next panel. And one of the things, actually Pete was just talking about is this world that we live in, which is mobile first. And we think about what's happened over the last 10 years. 10 years ago, our world of video consumption, of media consumption through traditional means started to decline. And along the way, our smartphones got better, broadband got better, things got faster, and content got better. And today, the world that we live in, we're seeing this second coming of video. We're seeing video that's being packaged in smaller forms, that's being delivered in our social media streams, and it has more context and is more relevant. So here to talk about this second coming of video, we've got Suchet Dash. Suchet is with Dubsmash. Michael Litt with Vidyard. And we have the sassiest blogger from Philadelphia moderating, Melissa Ward from Target Marketing. In the hand.
Shut up and sit down.
Hello. I hope you're all super excited because we're pretty stoked to talk about video. Video, I know, is definitely important to these two gentlemen. It is deeply important to me. At Target Marketing, I'm not only the sassiest blogger, but I am also a video creator. I have a weekly video series. So it's really great to be able to connect with these guys. So, my first question for you is, in the 20 years that video has been around, how has it evolved? Suchet?
Yeah, so, I think one of the things that we've definitely seen just in our application is just the way people are interacting with the camera. I think one of the things, a large percentage of our users grew up with a smartphone for the first time. So the single piece of hardware that is on their phone, which is different than, let's say, what I grew up with, or what you grew up with, which were the numbers, which is the piece of hardware where people would actually make calls with that. Or if you grew up with a BlackBerry, it was around texting. The only piece of hardware on your phone right now is really the camera. And the way that the consumer interacts with the video, with video now is very much about looking at the camera and actually creating sort of video on their own. And I think one of the things that that's done is that's created this incredible sort of ecosystem of users who are creating content for the first time. And what marketers are now really starting to embrace is really the ability to actually work with these types of content creators and actually use these types of formats and platforms like ours to be able to actually reach their audiences. And I think before that, when we thought about video, it was a beautiful, great, well put together, mastered piece of content. And now we're seeing the proliferation of more raw, unfiltered content that marketers are starting to adopt.
And Michael, how about you talk about this new wave of video marketing and the interest people have in it?
Yeah, so Vidyard exists to help marketers use video more productively and to essentially democratize the use of video across all companies. Because traditionally, if you think about the way video was used 20 years ago, you were buying ad space on broadcast television, which generally meant that unless it was VHS based, that was really the only on-demand way to consume video and therefore consume an advertisement or consume content that was designed to educate you on a product or sell you something, basically. So what we have today is all these platforms, things like Dubsmash, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, that are all essentially on-demand video services that have UGC content. Everybody has a 1080p recording device in their pocket. And it gives brands this new conduit to access their audience that, again, did not exist 20 years ago. And the reality is as humans, I don't have a cable subscription. I bet you the vast majority of the audience in here doesn't. So everyone here consumes the content that they want to watch on demand, whether that's mass-produced consumer content, stuff like Game of Thrones, all the way down to, what your friend did last night at the bar. And I think that is the biggest instrumental change in the second coming of video.
Right, we're really putting all the control in the consumer's hands. They get to make the choice that they want. So marketers have to be there to meet what the consumers want to be seeing and participating in. So, as we know, many people consider YouTube to be the grandfather of online video. But you know, we're seeing a lot of video that's being done using social media. We have Snapchat, we have Facebook Live, we have Periscope. So my first question with that is, how does social media play with video marketing? Michael?
That's a great question. I mean, we think about social media as essentially a distribution conduit or a channel for marketers. So if you're a B2B brand like Salesforce, for instance, or even a B2C brand like Red Bull, in today's world, you have to look at yourself as a media company. Meaning you're producing content, whether that is written content or video content, that gets broadcast and your consumers are digesting it on demand, as we just indicated. So social represents that conduit. And you know, the interesting thing about the live platforms, whether it's Facebook Live or Periscope and Twitter, is that you really have to choose which one you're going to utilize. A lot of the brands we work with are trying to syndicate their content out to as many channels as possible. So again, social is just essentially the megaphone for how you deliver content to your audience. Because if people are almost consuming stuff on demand, the content has to find them. Where are they? They're likely and largely on social.
And one of the things that you also need to be very clear about is that what you are programming for Snapchat needs to be different than what you program for Facebook Live, which is different than what you program for any other specific sort of platform, because the audience and the community, you have to think about it in context of what the community is consuming inside the platform, and does your content actually make sense? And I think that that's something where a lot of these users who are on these platforms and spend hours and hours every single day, they can easily sniff out when they just see a very mastered content or an ad that they see on TV. They will know it has to fit contextually with regards to the way the community is actually interacting with content.
Absolutely. It is so important to be as authentic as possible, and you can't have that perfectly staged thing, because they're going to notice. They're like, nah, that's overproduced. This isn't the real deal.
Yeah.
So, as we know, user-generated content is so key to marketing, and sometimes it is so hard to achieve. But when you're able to put, in this instance, your user behind the camera and let them to contribute, they become passionate, they want to be a part of this. Now, I know user-generated content is huge for Dubsmash.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, how can you get your audience or your customers excited and willing to generate content for you?
Yeah, I think, it's about being it's about kind of aligning your content with, again, what the community really wants. So we work a lot with different entertainment studios, we work with brands, and, to a certain degree, enabling the community to actually do interesting things with your content can be very fearful for a lot of marketers, right? And I think that it's not as if, and I think everyone will always think about the worst possible case scenario of, you can take my brand, you can do all these different things with it, but really it's a little bit about ceding control and allowing the community to be able to do really cool, unique things. And I think the way we think about ourselves at Dubsmash is we can create millions of brand ambassadors on your behalf, where they're actually going to be using your content. So let's say a line from a movie that's just about to come out, or the commercial that performed very well on TV, you can take that audio content and put it on Dubsmash, and the community will actually be able to kind of take it and send it to their close friends. And suddenly what ends up happening is you've created millions of brand ambassadors for your brand who are actually organically inserting you into these private conversations that are actually happening on Facebook Messenger, or on iMessage, or WhatsApp. And these are areas where probably on social networks you're actually not able to, or on these messaging networks you're not able to actually reach. And I think that that's where to give the community that seed is critical, and they'll surprise you with what they can be able to do.
And Michael, is there an easy way for B2B companies to get that juice from user-generated content?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think somewhere along the way, in B2B specifically, people got the perception that everything they produced, everything they did needed to be what we call Super Bowl quality. So it just needed to be super polished, super high-end, all the content marketing. But in doing so, they lost some of the personality in what they're doing, right? And if you think about some of the biggest B2B companies in the world, so Salesforce, for instance, keep bringing them up, they're obviously top of mind, but originally what they did to build their business is they brought prospects and customers together in a room at an event and had them talk and had them interact. And that kind of personal connection is what has been lost in the outbound marketing process. However, video plays a compelling role in humanizing a company's brand again. So we always say it's the next best thing to being there in person. And you've got a bunch of salespeople that are every day smashing out emails, trying to interact with your audience, and every email that is grammatically perfect and looks like an essay is just going to feel automated. So get your salespeople on camera, get them using their webcams, get them recording videos on their mobile phones, texting it to their buyers, texting it to their customers. People want that kind of humanity in the process. Get your customers on film. I'll go to events, I'll put my phone and ask a customer what video means to them, and I will share that with the world, because that stuff is more personal, it's more connected. And I think as we move towards this AI and automated world, people are going to want to be more human. So allow your customers, allow your employees to be more human and use video in that way.
Absolutely. I mean, there's research that shows that when you use just an image in your marketing, if you see another human, you're going to react positively to it. When it's a living, breathing, talking, sassing human, you're going to even react more to it.
It's crazy that we have to even talk about this, right? But yeah, I mean, it's robo-marketing.
Well, you have to remember, video is scary. I can't get in front of a camera. I might not be perfect. Whatever. Just do you. So then my question for both of you, and I'll let you pick who goes first, is what should the marketing team do in order to achieve buy-in from the CMOs and the decision makers when they're ready to embark on creating a video marketing strategy? How do you get Uncle John to say yes?
It's like my world. So give me a second here. I'll try to be super brief. So what I would say is CMOs are in this kind of new wave of being a CMO where you have to be really data focused, and all of your actions have to drive downstream actions, and you have to be able to report or measure what those activities look like. I'm the CEO of a company. My CMO's responsibility is driving pipeline, and I need to know down to the dollar every spend, every campaign, and ultimately how that's contributing to the bottom line. So video is inherently and can be a very expensive thing. You're bringing in an agency, you're focused on super quality stuff, you're bringing in tools. There's spend associated with that, and you need to be able to justify that to drive downstream insights with respect to how your video is working, and it doesn't have to be a black box. And the last thing I'll say is, marketers today are campaigning based around clicks. They're campaigning based around email opens, but the reality is a click on an email or a download of a white paper is a pretty useless metric, because our inboxes and our download folders are probably rammed full of white papers that we've never read. However, if you can identify if an individual or a group of individuals at least watched a portion of a video and understand what was said in that video, then you can justify that digital body language and understand actually what's compelling and what is driving attention and driving purchase. So for me, it comes down to data and insights.
Just to add to that, I would say it's really about test, iterate, and repeat. I mean, I think so many platforms now allow you to be able to test, and there isn't that level of permanence in a lot of these platforms where you can be able to actually test something for 24 hours, get the results, be able to then go back and kind of work on that. And I think it's all about a lot of times walking into a room with the CMO with test results already in hand, because you've already
9%.
Should have 100. So the kind of tip is to keep the content short. Around campaigns and campaign management, we have data that shows that people will largely consume video content around their bathroom breaks. And so there's something about sitting on the can and watching a video that works, and I think more people need to be considerate of it, especially when you go to use social platforms. And I mean, I don't know if this is being talked about at this conference, but the data does not lie. I'll hand it over to you.
I can confirm that. We're constrained to 10 seconds. That's our maximum length. We see the average length is around 6 seconds. And we've noticed that, in terms of weekend usage is quite high, right? Obviously. And a lot of things, even like, going to, before you go to school, going after school, we see spikes in the data. One of the more interesting things that we've started to see is we're quite large internationally in a lot of growing emerging markets. And one of the consistencies that we do see is we see the people in their rooms really using the product. And the major reason for that is because of strong Wi-Fi connections. Whereas when you're actually in, in the Western markets, we actually see them walking outside with it with stronger 4G connections. And so that's the other aspect of where is your product actually being used or being consumed, and how do you orient yourself around that? So even in the way that we potentially target some of the content that people are consuming is a little bit different in kind of both of these regions as well.
Awesome. So I have just one last question. It's a two-parter.
Obviously I'm biased. Talking around UGC is something that the numbers. It is a massive new sort of it's a massive new trend that is here to stay, and we're seeing it across all demographics. So it's not that we're just seeing the young Gen Z or millennial who's using it. We're seeing parents, of young parents, but also even older folks who are really embracing this and actually taking their phone and creating some amazing content with it that I think marketers will be able to benefit from. So I think it's really about what is your strategy in 2017 to really be able to embrace this trend.
Awesome. Michael?
Yeah, so really quickly on the first one, absolutely. We did a survey of 3,500 companies all over the world just to get a benchmark on where they're spending their dollars in 2017. And 92% of them rated video as one of the highest spend ratios for what they're doing from a market campaign perspective. So if you're not in the 92%, you're definitely in the minority, which means you're probably going to get left behind. The second piece in terms of just making it easy for yourself and your company to produce video content. So it doesn't need to be Super Bowl quality. Don't think about producing something that's going to cost tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars and probably not work. Just get out there and start producing it and use it in the middle and even at the bottom of your funnel. And that could just be a recorded demo of your product. So literally just download a tool, record a demo of your product, stick it on your website, allow your customers to serve themselves and learn about you in an on-demand fashion, measure and repeat, and you'll get into the video world and you'll start producing it. And then before you know it, you'll have a team and you'll be producing that Super Bowl content for yourself.
Awesome. So you all are going to start doing video, right? Like tomorrow? Yeah? Yeah? Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you so much.